Welcome to the most wonderful week of the year. Well, maybe second most wonderful. I don't know. It's the NFL draft week, which I like. A lot of other people like. But really, the most wonderful week of the year is probably our draft week, which happens next week. So, anyways, it's the wonderful previews that you've been looking forward to. All those next upcoming Phase Marvel movies that you've been waiting 6 months to a year for, that are getting ready to come out, that you get to start seeing in 6 months. But nonetheless, we're excited to talk about it. We're excited to talk about the league. So this is going to be the first of two podcasts this week. We want to finish up where we were on some of the need conversation last week, as well as talk about some of the sort of news in the NFL. And again, I've got three really bright guys here with me to help talk through that. We got the Eagles, the Giants, and the Panthers. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me this Monday.
Thanks for having us.
Always a pleasure. Anyways, like I said, some super mega trade went down. Thank you, Ian Rappaport, for the alliteration on this and the over exaggeration of the big deal and size of the return. But nonetheless, the trade for Aaron Rodgers finally happened today before the draft, as everyone kind of was thinking it was going to. Compensation was a swap of the 13th and 15th pick. Second rounder, I think it was 42. Jets actually have 42 and 43 back to back, I believe. Then
they did.
A fifth and a sixth round swap next year, as well as a conditional second next year that can move up to a first if Rodgers plays 65% of the snaps. So this led to a lot of conversation in the chat today. So felt like it was a reasonable place to lead off. And I think we really had a lot of people on both sides of the coin here. Some saying this was a overpay by the Jets. Some saying absolutely this is what you do when you go for it now. Others saying, okay, go for other options rather than Rodgers. Does Rodgers still have it? Is he the right guy for the Jets? A lot of different varying opinions here. So we'll kind of try and cover a couple of those perspectives. But we'll start with James. What were your thoughts when this went down?
About time. It's been just talked about all off season. It's about time. I'm a big fan of Rodgers. I think there's too much hate on him. He was two-time MVP going into last year. That rush defense, the whole defense for the Packers was all over the place and bad. They had a lot of injuries, and that offense just couldn't get things together. And a lot of people, especially that, a recency bias. A lot of people go to that Week 18 game and they're like, well, you win and you end against the Lions. And it's like, okay, well, Aaron Jones fumbles the ball. You had Romeo Doubs drop a touchdown that literally hit his hands going down the sidelines. Either of those flipped that game. So there's just a lot of unneeded hate on him.
Yeah, that's true. Again, I think there's a question here of what value is he still adding. A lot of Packers really struggled first half of last year and then kind of rounded in, but couldn't quite make the playoffs near the end of the year. So I guess the question is, does he still have that difference maker potential if you plug in with a lot of young guys? Or is it kind of going to be a LeBron James type situation where it's I brought in Lazard because he's my guy. I brought in Mercedes Lewis because he's my guy. I need to bring in these guys. Odell Beckham is gone, but I'm going to bring in DeAndre Hopkins because he's more my age. Like, is this going to be is this Jets team what we're going to see, or are there more moves to come and more excitement to be have?
I definitely can see more moves to kind of make Rodgers as comfortable as possible there. But I don't see the Jets moving necessarily all in. I think they're kind of aware that he's not necessarily the youngest quarterback in the league.
I feel like, I mean, I'm a big Rodgers believer. But I feel like what they're trying to do is recapture that, like, Tom Brady, Tampa Bay, load him into a Jax team, and now we're a contender. But the difference in that scenario was they didn't have to give up, essentially a first, a second, and a trade down to do it. He was a free agent signing. So I feel like it's a little short-sighted, honestly. They're like going for glory for this year, but Rodgers is 39, almost 40. I'm a huge fan of him, but like I would just rather have had Lamar, who's like what 14 years younger.
And one first rounder more expensive.
Yeah, but like that's
potentially the signing too. Like, not only is he a first round more expensive, but you also have to, I don't know, have Baltimore decline the option.
Yep.
Yeah, I understand. There's other considerations. It's not like an apples to apples thing, but like going from instead of the second rounder, it's now the first rounder more for a much younger quarterback who you can have for the next decade seems, I don't know, even like a rookie. Like, I guess they flamed out so hard with Zach Wilson, they're now just spurned, and they like have to have a more guaranteed thing, which is fine. But I think obviously this trade makes sense for them for this season.
Yeah, they went from 13 to 15, right? And
Yeah, that wasn't a big move.
Yeah,
Yeah.
15, 42.
but they keep their first this year, which adds a productive player.
And they still have a
So-
second because they got the extra second from just shipping out Elijah Moore, which seems like was going to happen no matter what happened. So
Right. So they're leveraging their future for, and it's only 1 year's worth of picks. That's fine.
it's
It's next year's second which will become a first if Roger plays 65% of the snap. So I know Colts was saying like, oh, maybe they'll just be winning so much that he'll be benched. But no, like basically it's if Aaron Rodgers doesn't get hurt, that next year's first is gone.
Yeah. So you give up 1 first round pick. That's fine.
for the chance to win a ring. Yeah, that's a lot better than what the Rams did. They
Right.
didn't quite do a fuck them picks. And Stafford's a lot younger, but he was coming with a very known about shoulder injury issue that's been going on since his rookie year, second year in the league. He dislocated, messed up his shoulder in a game and finished. So he's had a long history of having shoulder problems.
I mean, here's the other wrinkle though. Like, yes, they're paying a first and a second to try and win a ring this year, but they're trying to win a ring in the hardest conference in the league, not the softest conference like Tom Brady was a couple of years ago. Like, it's not like a guarantee. Like, oh, they're now a Super Bowl favorite because they have Rodgers. Like, Rodgers couldn't even get the Packers to the playoffs last year, and offensive weapon wise, yes, they're better, but
Well, they have a defense too. Like that was part of the problem with the Packers. There was stretches last year where they were last in run defense. When you're the worst run defense, it's really easy to keep elite quarterbacks off the field. Keep it to where they're more crunched for time, make it to where it's harder for them and to where they need more chunk plays. And when you don't have receivers also on the outside, it's just a disaster. Like it's
Is that really the toughest division in the league now?
it is the division conference.
conference.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say that the Easts are probably two of the tougher divisions. I would say the conference, definitely from a quarterback perspective, the AFC is superior to the NFC.
By far.
The concern I had here, and again, I think you guys just kind of touched on it a little bit at the end here, and I touched on it a little bit in the chat today, is Rodgers is definitely a QB upgrade. I don't think anyone's going to debate that. The concern I have here is the Bills are perennial, loves in the AFC East. The Dolphins were a playoff team last year and gave, frankly, the Ravens a tougher game than I think people expected with the quarterback situation they had. New England is never a pushover, or at least hasn't been in 20 years. And now you've got the Jets with Rodgers and a good, young, promising team. So something's got to give there.
Well,
So 11, just one more point, and then I'll yield. 11 games out of 17. If Rodgers plays a full 11 games, and I know we're talking snaps, and not all games are created equal in terms of snaps. 11 divided by 17 is 64.7%. So he could miss 6 games and still hit the 65% threshold. Or we could be 11 games into the season. The Jets could be 6-5 in the midst of a wild card push. They could miss the playoffs and owe their first. I think a lot of folks are looking at this saying, well, if it's a playoff first or a conference championship first, then it's not that big of a deal. You happily pay that. This could be a top 10 pick next year. And I'm not saying that because the Jets are going to be awful. I'm saying that because they could get to a point where Rodgers misses a few games, or a couple things go bad, and they still have the 65% point and have to give their first up, even though they finish 7-10 or 8-9.
Yeah.
No, I watched a lot of their games last year, and their first game against the Dolphins, they blew them out. The second game against the Dolphins, they barely, every game that they beat Josh Allen last year. They beat him, and then the second game they only lost by one score. Every division rival they played last year, essentially with a negative at quarterback, they almost won. So I don't see how with Aaron Rodgers they aren't close to, if not the favorite to win the division, because that defense was phenomenal last year. There was a couple of teams, I don't know, I think if you go look points against last year, they're probably top 5 unit in the league. They just also happen to be really bad at scoring points.
Yep. Again, just trying to cover the opposing point here, but I agree. I think it's tough not to make them your favorite in the AFC East after this trade. If the rumors are true that Mac Jones is really on the trade block, he's on a short leash this year, especially with some of the success that he had last year. So you take those things into account, and there's definitely a path for them to win the division, nonetheless, to make a strong run at a wild card, especially with some of the challenges that especially the AFC South is having, and potentially the AFC North. All right. Any other thoughts on Mr. Rodgers, the Jets, or even the Packers before we move on to our league?
Jordan Love's going to win MVP.
The one thing with the Packers that'll be interesting is I think May 1st is when they have to choose to pick up Jordan Love's 5th-year option. So they kind of need to know. We're going to learn a lot, I think, in this draft about what the Packers think about Jordan Love, which will be very interesting. I think right now we're all assuming he's going to step in, but I don't know. I'm blanking on the head coach's name.
Oh, no, you mean, yeah.
The Packers head coach, LaFleur. His comments about Love really concerned me this offseason. So we'll see. I mean, I hope that he's the guy, but maybe 13 was part of a move to maybe move up or snag one of these quarterbacks that ends up falling.
I think their big issue is at tackle. David Bakhtiari still hasn't really been back at all, and Zach Tom did not look good at all. They're going into camp without really a tackle that I would even be happy to have any quarterback out there, let alone a guy that doesn't have a lot of NFL snaps, being put in the kind of pressure he is, with the, hey, you have to be good this year or a 5th-year option or, everything else. That's a lot. And then, with everything they put into this defense with how bad it was last year, this is a huge year for the coaching staff.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, this is also LaFleur's prove it year without Rodgers, because we kind of, they in tandem were quite impressive, but he obviously had a Hall of Fame quarterback there to prop him up on his fresh start. So it'll be interesting to see how they do. I think the Packers could be very underwhelming this year.
I think they do better, and Jordan Love statistically does better than Aaron Rodgers this year.
Can we get someone to bet this dude?
I'm not betting any of this.
I think there's a chance. I really liked the talent coming out. You've had several years to sit and learn in the system, and it's a very winning head coach. You would expect everything has been progressed and done well. They definitely have a lot of question marks. It's just, they're going to be a lot of fun to watch this year, just for all the question marks on that team.
He's played a little bit, so he understands what the NFL speed, game speed is. He's going to do fine. I would like to see him in the MVP race, which I think is very possible.
You're talking about Jordan Love?
Yes.
I mean, I'd like to see Daniel Jones in the MVP race, but come on.
Well, Jordan Love came out as a really good raw talent at Utah State. There's a reason why a team that already had an Aaron Rodgers went and got a QB.
Oh boy, you guys are really optimistic on Love here.
I'm not saying he's going to be over the moon. I'm not saying he's going to win the MVP, but I think there's a real chance that he gets a couple of years to prove it. I would not be surprised to see his 5th year get picked up or him sign some kind of extension.
I do think the Daniel Jones like not getting his 5th year picked up and then them having to hand him this contract is a reason to just go ahead and pick it up. And if it's a 1 year, that sucks if he sucks, but that way you kind of protect yourself from the ceiling a bit too.
Yeah, I think a lot of teams going forward are just going to do it.
Yeah.
Like, especially in the Trey Lance, Jordan Love situation, where it's like you drafted these guys with these huge upside potentials. You haven't had the chance to see enough of them yet. You've already spent the draft capital. You might as well spend the cash because the cash is a lot easier than the draft capital to make up.
Yeah.
This is true. All right. Well, it's all going to be fun and games until Anthony Richardson goes 13 to the Packers and win everybody's mock drafts. But nonetheless, let's jump into some of the needs. So we did the AFC last week. Again, we obviously have Jeremy as part of the AFC, even though he's NFC because this is the order of the rosters on that main page. The NFC will have the Bengals included because just kind of a matter of where they slot on the rosters page. But again, we'll start with a team that's made a couple moves recently, and we'll get into those moves in the back end of the podcast as we usually do for trades. But we'll talk about the Bears and some of the things that they need to be doing here. They've got 31 total players, $20 million in cap space. Draft compensation isn't phenomenal. I would say is the starting point I would have for them, and this probably goes without saying, is start with defensive consolidation. They're they were very heavily invested in the success of the Falcons on offense. That's died down a little bit, I guess, since some of the moves that they made, but they really need to, I'd say, consolidate some of those defensive pieces so that they can, use the draft capital they have and fill in the gaps enough so that they can not really, hurt their pick so much, could not have their pick be so bad this year, be competitive enough. But really, like I said for some of the teams last week, like just please don't pay for 2024 or 2025 yet. Like give yourself an opportunity to have your picks and go into a season with the opportunity to rebuild because your team is screaming for it. But if you don't control your futures, it's very difficult to make that rebuild happen.
Who has the Bears first?
I think it's Titans.
He's probably not going to give it up.
Oh.
Yeah.
It is, in fact, the Titans. He's a very happy man.
I mean, I would approach him, and I would be willing to drastically overpay. He's got the 49ers first, which I think could be equally as maybe not quite as good, but if you add a premium on top of that, like maybe that could sway him. And we'll talk about the 49ers later. But I mean, I don't like I get like you don't want, the pick you don't own to become super good when you're not going to get the benefit of it, but like I don't think there's enough here to realistically compete. So like I'd rather just be stripping this down now for future draft assets or picks even this year and trying to kind of just build a foundation that'll be more attuned with what your window will look like in a few seasons once you get all your draft capital back and everything.
All right. Any other thoughts on the Bears?
Sell it all.
Sell it all. All right, let's talk about the Lions or the Lions. Let's go with Giants. Why don't you talk about the Lions first?
I think he just needs to keep following his plan. He's been really patient, and he took best player available last year with Drake London instead of taking Pickett. He hasn't made a lot of moves. I'm pulling up his assets right now, draft assets. So
103, 112, 125, handful of seconds.
He's got 3 seconds, 3 thirds, 3 firsts. So and he's got a couple bonus point picks and stuff next year. So this is the draft, right? 103, 112, 125. This is the draft where he needs to get a quarterback and another, blue chip piece that's going to form the foundation for his team going forward. I think he's been, like I said, very patient and kind of doing this over 2 drafts now. We've had Lions, right? Or is this the second draft?
This will be the second.
Gotcha. But yeah, he hasn't kind of gone the Texans route where Texans started, consolidating some of his picks and trying to get some star players. This is kind of like the other end of the spectrum where he's just literally building through the draft. And I mean, he's got needs all over his roster. He needs depth everywhere. He's got 21 players or something. But like I said, he's got 12 picks in the first 4 rounds here. I think he just needs to kind of keep staying with his plan. And I'd love to see him after this draft, have a good foundation here so that he starts, joining some of these pods and stuff too, because he's got a lot to offer on the analytics side that I'm always interested in seeing more from. So I'm hopeful to get his attention a bit more once this rebuild is more on the other side of the hill.
Yeah, I'm kind of interested, and I think the thing I wrote down for him when I did these last week was quarterback. He's got the 103. He's going to have, the third quarterback, probably the second quarterback, or Bijan. I doubt Bijan makes it to him, but if he does, then the answer is Bijan. But you're going to have one of your first 2 choices at quarterback. So get that guy, lock him in. And then at 12, you should have an option of the 3rd or 4th running back, in my estimation. So if you add that to this roster, you've got a potential starting quarterback. You've got a timeshare running back with other timeshare running backs. You've got a receiving core anchored by London, Palmer, and depth. And then Parham, say what you will, could have an option to really hit that starting role as well as Tremble this year. So he could have the makings of not a great offense, but at least top 20. And then defense is something he's been slowly developing over time, or something that really he can focus on next year or with some of the later capital he has this year. But this could be the year he starts to make that transition from, all right, I'm a perennial, top pick to, all right, I'm not going to win. I'm not going to make the playoffs in a wild card, but I'm going to steal 4 or 5 or 6 games. I'm not going to be in the tankathon that other teams have. And who knows, if things go well for me the first 4 weeks, maybe I pull a Pats type move and make a push for the wild card.
Yeah,
But he'd start with a quarterback and a running back in his first 2 picks to get there.
I would say, honestly, at 103, take your time. There's going to be a lot of high-value players there. There's other teams like the Jets who are a little bit further along in their rebuild. At least I feel. You can sit there at 3, listen to your offers. If there's a quarterback you love, I'm still sitting there and waiting. I wouldn't force the quarterback pick just because there are quarterbacks there. I feel like an offer with this draft class at 3, getting the second QB to where it might do a little bit more for you in the long term.
Yeah, someone who sat on the clock with 103 last year, those offers are not guaranteed to roll in. Now, they're a very different class.
Yeah.
There was only one first-round quarterback that obviously people weren't as high on. But, it's romantic to hold out for that, I'm going to get this great Godfather offer. But, honestly, I think the best offer I got was, a late first and a future first or something for 103 when I was on the clock. That was from Mike. So like, it's not a guarantee that that's going to roll in. But I do agree. It's worth being patient and listening and not just smashing the button. But I wouldn't guarantee that it's going to happen.
My thought process is just Pats is a big Ohio State fan. He sat here, he's collected all these picks. He's having a hard time getting 24 picks. If he's going to be forced to do something, he might just decide to, hey man, you want 4 first rounders for that 103? Because CJ Stroud's still there, and I didn't think he was going to be there at 102 or whatever it was he ended up doing. I just could see the Jets offering a haul or the Pats offering a haul to potentially get in that slot.
Well, we don't know what he's going to do because
You never do.
yeah, it's hard to pin it down. But I sincerely hope it's not offering 4 first-round picks for any player in this draft. But we'll see.
We're good. Yeah, maybe it's 4 first-round picks in this draft for 103 in the first next year. And again, if he picks up 4 first-round picks in this draft and is still in range to get a quarterback or finds a quarterback through some of his other picks, I mean, so yeah, let's kind of game plan that for a second here. If he moves 103 and is first next year, for what picks to
like 114, where you could potentially still get like a Hendon Hooker, or maybe let's say Tanner McKee goes really early day 2 to like the Raiders or something. I don't know. There's. Okay, I'm not saying that would be sexy. I'm just saying that'd be a shot pick that you would have along with all the other assets you have, to where you get a lot more to help build around than just one player at 3.
Let's think about this. So yeah, they'd have 112 and still I think 129. You guys said, or 125?
125.
125. So we'd have 112, 114, 118, 125, 127, 131. Basically, from 125 on, you can just pound defense. 112, 114, 118, you take the 3 best offensive players available. And you set yourself up, again, you may not be a title contender, but unless you completely whiff on these guys, and again, I just moved a early second, 24 or 24 second for a starting quarterback. So you can go find other options if you need them. So, again, it would be fun to see him take that path. Again, whether that's the right path, whether that's something Patriots is even interested in, who knows? But you know what? Sometimes you just do it for the lulz, so you do it for the pod. All right, let's move on down. Last AFC team, but again, grouped in with the NFC teams, the Bengals. So, again, made his big splash earlier this offseason trading for the 101 and has been fending off offers for it for the last, I want to say 4 months as a result. So he's a week away from it coming to fruition, either in a pick or in a trade now or, by that time. But, what do people think that Bengals should be doing right now? Let's go ahead and go to RJ for this one.
What was your question?
What should the Bengals be doing?
Oh, well, I thought you asked something else. Probably needs to be looking at what quarterback he wants to take at 101, because Ryan Tannehill is not going to be a good option to go into the season with. And then he needs to figure out who he's going to buy a running back from.
That is interesting. So again, there were a couple of comments today from Ray Cathan, the new GM of the Titans, where it's talking about he has not received any offers for Derrick Henry yet, despite the rumors of him going to Philadelphia. The other thing that was mentioned was he has spoken to Ryan Tannehill, and Ryan is aware of his place in the organization. That's pretty vague.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's not long for that starting job. He might make it through the season still on the team, but that's about it.
It was a question of how or when does he get replaced. Is it a first-round quarterback? Is it someone that's more developmental that gives him this year to get there? A lot of questions to be answered, but I don't know. That's that seems to be the path there. Again, is he able to make that move down? Panthers, what do you think? Did you listen?
Sweet.
Cool. All right.
He's just speechless.
Yeah. All right. So, Brandon, why don't you catch us up here what we've missed?
Yeah, I mean, he's got a strong team outside of quarterback and running back. So I know when he originally acquired this pick, it was very much with Bijan in mind, thinking Tannehill might be more safe. But I think the offseason has proven that the Titans are in a rebuild mode or retool mode, and Tannehill's likely not part of that future as an older, I'll say, pretty meh quarterback. I would be shocked if he does take Bijan. There has to be another move here to get a quarterback that can actually help him this year and beyond. So it'll be interesting. Luckily, he has the real life draft to help kind of determine what that future needs to look like ahead of our draft. So if the Titans don't end up taking anyone, Tannehill's job seems more secure. If there's not a Trey Lance trade, those types of things will help make his pick for him. But very interested to see if he does need a quarterback, where he ends up taking one, or who he ends up taking, because he's had some interesting quarterback selections before.
Yeah. And what I wrote down for him is just enjoy the ride. He traded for the 1-1 for the fun and for everything that's going to come with it. And at the end of the day, to take Bijan. So he was okay with this plan to start the offseason. Things may have changed where it may not be the desired plan, but this was the plan he set in motion. So he's going to have off ramps if he wants them, or he gets to hang on and take the player he traded up for in the first place. So just enjoy this and find the right deal if it's there, and if not, enjoy Bijan as the next generational running back that comes along every 5 years.
Or just accept one of the many trade offers you might have sitting in your inbox.
Again, he's quite the tease. Oh, I'm drinking. I'm in the Florida Keys. I'm on vacation. Sending me trade offers. I don't know. Outside of the comments you got, and I sent him a couple. I haven't seen any.
He's got 3 sitting, just waiting for him to sit accept. From me alone.
Just waiting. I feel like I constantly try and get to 10 offers out there on a regular basis. I feel like he's probably sitting at 10 offers in his inbox on a regular basis.
Yeah.
It's like RJ and Bill were saying last year. It's not having the patience to have all these picks to can build for 2 years in the future. I don't know if I'd have the patience to hold on to the 101 with getting constantly bombarded with this many offers. It's good for you, Chris. Enjoy.
Yeah. I'm very interested to see how he supplements the other position he doesn't draft. It'll be interesting.
All right. We'll move on to the Vikings, a team nobody likes talking about. James, do we have you back?
Nope.
All right. I'm going to kick him so he can rejoin. Kick from studio so that he can rejoin and hopefully have better audio. All right. RJ, do you want to talk about my team?
Sure. All right, let me get to that screen. Sorry, I keep clicking off to look at all the rosters and assets of all the teams we're discussing. I'm also waiting for the trade that you did to go through. Did it get processed yet?
I don't think so.
Oh, sad. I think you need to find something nice and shiny on offense. But other than that, I think need to get rid of all those terrible picks.
Yeah, they're really awful.
Like No, I'm talking about like the 4s and the 5s. Like, I wonder how many you can pair those together with like one of the lesser positions, like a cornerback, and turn your cornerback 2 into like a slight tier upgrade. But yeah, if you can go out and find something splashy on offense, like a big wide receiver, big running back. But I like your team right now. Oh, a tight end would be really nice.
Yeah. Brandon, what are you thinking?
I was trying to think of like a witty way for you to you need to share your vision for what you're trying to do, because your roster has flipped so much in the last couple of months. um it's interesting to see it now, like just kind of knowing like what some of the pieces and stuff were before. I i I think team needs that stick out, like a running back and another wide receiver to pair with Pickens. I did like the Wandale ad. I know you got 108, so I'm going to assume that's either like maybe a Gibbs who falls, or whatever of the top kind of 4 wide receivers might still be there at 8. You can kind of plug into this roster. Yeah, tight end's a weakness. I think you have a later first. You can theoretically draft a tight end there, and have another kind of more shiny name. Your defense is still good. I mean, I don't know how you keep trading away defensive players but still have a good defense. So, um, yeah, I think it's still a pretty like competitive team. If you know, we'll see with Pickett. I know there's some various thoughts on him, but like assuming that him and Baker are both starting next year, like that's a decent tandem to go into the year, and we can see if Pickett actually has like another gear to go up besides like just the 15 points per game he's currently getting. But even that's not bad, especially on a rookie contract. Um, yeah, I don't know. I mean, you also I think made some pretty smart free agent additions recently. I saw like you had signed like 3 or 4 wide receivers for the minimum, that were just pretty good like depth ads. Like Andy Isabella was one that I was like, oh damn, that's probably someone that we should have fought for a little bit, just from his draft capital and speed standpoint. Um, yeah, so that's kind of my thoughts to supplement RJ's.
Yeah, I agree. In terms of my vision, I am a true believer in I don't need to worry about a starting lineup ever because it's best ball, but I certainly don't need to worry about a starting lineup in April. Um, so that being said, I know I have holes. I know I need to fill them, but take a quote from former Falcons. That's future Mike's problem. Um, for now, it's just kind of moving pieces around that I like to position myself a little bit better. They're a little bit cheaper, a little bit more diversified, a little bit deeper, things of that standpoint. So I'm not trying to do just one thing. I have a range of kind of where I'm aiming for in the draft. We'll see if that ends up happening. But I mean, I have deals where I'm acquiring picks. I have deals out there where I'm giving up picks. So we'll see what ends up happening over the next couple of next week or so before we actually get to the draft.
Yeah, I was trying to like reverse engineer the trades that like you got 109, then you traded it for 104, and then I got back to 108. I was trying to like do the math there, to see like what that total package out versus in was. There was too many trades to just spew off the top of my head now, but I'm curious. Like I think if you take each one in a vacuum, it's likely good value. I feel like you generally get some pretty good value in your trades. But looking at the whole picture of just like you did have a DK. Well, that was originally like a Marquise Brown, who's like much less impressive to me. But yeah, it's viewing your transactions page is always very interesting.
Right, and at some point maybe I'll do kind of a solo of taking the totality of this offseason, put it together and say, what did I give up? What did I get? And people can decide whether that was worth it.
Yeah.
Mike's really good at making like a whole bunch of trades where he gets like profits like a nickel as a throw in, and then 20 trades later he's like, oh, I have another $1 that I just randomly found.
All right. Speaking of a guy who's sitting on $1 and playing with house money, let's move on to the Bucks. Super Bowl champion, pretty solid setup to kind of start with here, especially on offense. I'll go ahead and kick off what I think he needs to be doing. I think he needs to not be resting on his laurels and start pivoting. Eckler's asked for a trade out of the Chargers. Obviously, that kind of makes it tough to move him. But I think if he could pivot off of Eckler, Ingram's good season, maybe one of his receivers, and make sure he's well positioned going forward. He's got $11 million in cap space. His defense is getting older and potentially a little bit more suspect considering some of the pieces that have moved around. Wouldn't say you could count on what got him to the title last year, getting him there this year. So I would say starting the pivot off of Eckler, off of Ingram, and then potentially selling high on either T. Higgins before he's got to pay him big money, or Pittman before he's got to pay him big money with the whatever quarterback Indy brings in. I know these are young, promising players, but this is opportunity for him to take his wide receiver 2 or an aging running back and use that to refuel the back end of his roster without really compromising his ability to compete.
If I am Bucks, I'm taking, as ridiculous as it sounds, I'm taking Max Crosby and one of my more expensive secondary pieces, like Rashid Shaheed or Tevis Gibson, and I am seeing what 4 or 5 starting assets I can get for that package of 2 players. Just flesh out my team that way.
Yeah, I think the he's got solid like starters everywhere, top to bottom. But the depth is a concern. He was the healthiest team last year. That's why he won. I feel like everyone else in the NFC lost like 5 or 6 starters, and he just had everybody going. So it's. He should learn from that, and he was lucky the first time around. But I kind of agree, like breaking down an Eckler if he could into like 2 other running backs, or one of Higgins and Pittman. I probably wouldn't do both. Crosby is the crown jewel of this team, $5 million, 300-point defensive end. He's a Pro Bowl this year, so like you got to hope next year he isn't a Pro Bowler, so you can send him long term. But even if it's 3 years of $5 million Max Crosby, and then you have to franchise him, like that's still not the worst thing in the world.
Defensive ends are the positions that that are least likely to put up numbers year in and year out.
It's also going to be bloated,
right?
So next year, which is one of the reasons I moved on from Garrett was. There's about to be a whole bunch of outside linebackers that are now going to count as defensive ends. So, like, while a premium position there, which Crosby and Garrett both are, is still valuable, maybe it's not quite as valuable as they used to be, or they will be, I guess, this year.
So you take that $4 million, pair it with somebody that's like $15 million, along with his $11 million in cap space, and I'm sure you could get $25 million worth of like startable assets.
He doesn't have 11 million though. Actually, the Zaire Franklin extension isn't calculated, and I think that's like 12 million or something.
Okay.
So a lot of his cap is actually phantom cap.
Yeah. But so then
I see your point. I mean, there's Michael Hoyt, 14 mil at D tackle.
Yep.
That's
Maybe you move him and the wide receiver that I had said before, the $18 million one. Move both of those along with Crosby and see if you can get, a wide receiver 3, a tight end 2, two quality defensive ends at like $3 million a piece, and a better defensive tackle.
if we really wanted to get spicy, see how much you could milk out of Broncos now that you have Fields.
Yeah.
Broncos now doesn't have a Kirk Cousins to worry about, but he's got a Ritter. Maybe
give Broncos Fields, Crosby, and all of your horrible contracts, and Broncos will just give you his whole team.
God, this is just a fun idea. I like all of these ideas. All right, let's move. Let's keep moving here. We're at the 45-minute mark. We still have a lot of the NFC to go. Falcons. This one's kind of obvious, so I'll go ahead and say this, even though we're all thinking it. It's cap space. He's got picks. He doesn't have the cap space for those picks. He needs to move along some of these, items to get the space to make those picks. So let's go ahead and do that. I mean, he's put Jacobs on the block. He's put Montgomery on the block. He acquired Samuel, but still has to move his $16 million. He's got to actually make the deals to get to where he needs to get to. And I know he's a newer owner, but that's going to require either trading it for lesser capital or trading it for a cheaper option at that, position. You might not get as good of a quality player back from it, but that's what you're getting, because Jacobs hasn't signed his tender yet. Montgomery is in a timeshare. These guys are in tough situations. So if you're going to move the cap space, you got to take a cheaper option, and you might not get as good of a player, but that's what you got to do. Or you got to move those picks and use those to upgrade yourself. So it's a tough situation to be in, but it's time to start making some moves.
Yeah. And the other thing I would say is, quarterback. Kyler's going to likely miss, the first half of the season. How can he insulate that so that he can, still get some points there while Kyler's resting up?
I mean, if I hadn't already gone and gotten him, I think Baker would have been a good option for him. But somebody who's going to get that start for at least the first half of the season makes a lot of sense for him. And again, Baker may not get that start for the first half of the season. Things may go sideways, but these are the pieces that he should be going for, or he needs to pivot off of these players to cheaper options and then use the picks to add depth. That's how previous Falcons did it. He's got to figure out what he wants his team to be. All right, he's dropped off the podcast, but we can still talk about his team. Let's go to the Panthers here. I'm just going to kick off with what I had thought about here, and you guys fill in based off of your additional thoughts. I think really running back and receiver depth are the big things here for him. Like Goff as a quarterback, I don't think Detroit really messes with that right now. It doesn't seem like Campbell's style. Panthers really, until Williams comes back, lacks that RB1. And again, that knee injury was really bad for Williams, so I don't think he's going to be back for, I'd say, first, quote, 10 of our games. So he really needs an option to get him off of the right foot. And then at the same point, kind of, he's got good receiver depth, 1 through 3, but I wouldn't mind adding a fourth there, considering how important they are to flex or other options there. So those are the things I'd really focus on there. Otherwise, I think he's got a pretty well-rounded out roster. He just needs to fill in some of the gaps here or there. He doesn't have any first, but he has some decent picks in the second or in the future he could use to help with that.
Yeah, I would say, add enough to, fill in the roster, or move things around, where you have another relevant defensive tackle, another cornerback that can give you points, maybe give you a tight end that's going to get a couple more snaps. But I would just say, kind of stay put and figure out what your roster is. There's a lot of question marks. There's so many players where you look at it and the point total next to it isn't a good representation of what those players are. So it's like I would just, even for him to figure out what kind of a team he is, I would kind of just be patient. And this looks to be a team that, like, he's going to get the majority of action or like trade movement somewhere closer to the trade deadline rather than the beginning of the season.
Yeah. I think running back is a huge need. I agree on Javonte, and even if he does like come back before like week 8 or 10, P Ryan, as a former Mixon owner, like P Ryan gets on the field. He's really good in pass pro. He's a good like short yardage back. I could see P Ryan, and like Sean Payton likes to have a kind of committee of running backs. I don't think he can rely on Javonte to be that like workhorse for the whole year. And that leaves a lot of number 2 or number 3 or number 4 / free agent guys filling out the rest of his backs here. So that would be one position. I think his receivers are pretty fine. Like the depth is there. If you can argue between like Van Jefferson versus Marquez Valdez-Scantling as like the wide receiver 3, so like that's a pretty good spot to be in. I think defensive end is the other position that like pick 205. Like you're probably praying like a defensive end has fallen there to round out that room. Von Miller, like not sure when he's supposed to be back, but he did tear up his knee kind of in the middle of the season. So you're really relying on former Saints or current Saints pass rushers here to, I guess, hold that room down. But I would be a little concerned about trying to add a piece here.
Fair enough. Bill, any comments? Talking about the Panthers.
Oh, hi, Bill.
Hi, I'm here. Made it very late. So Panthers is fine across the board. I mean, the one thing that I came in halfway through the conversation, so if we said it, I apologize. But he needs another corner or two. But I don't know what he's going to do with that because he's already at 40 players. So that's a concern there. But, I mean, generally speaking, like I heard Brandon say it, like his running backs are all dependent on Javonte, and he's probably going to miss the majority of the fantasy season, if not more, which definitely impacts the real NFL season. But
well, it's definitely the majority of our fantasy season with the doubleheaders and the first 2 games in the first 4 weeks.
Yeah. So I would say definitely maybe look to find a buyer for Javonte that'll give you a better running back to use this year if you believe in your team. But I mean, his wide receivers are great. His tight end room is entirely unproven for the most part, and are all quote unquote breaking out this year. So not a bad team at all. Just has to figure out a few things and should do just fine.
Yeah, I feel like he's got a pretty good like floor fantasy point wise, but the ceiling is low.
Mm-hmm.
But if you got the depth, I mean, a floor is all you need to go all the way.
That's true. All right, moving along. Saints. It's made some moves this offseason. Thing I pointed out is consolidating some of his defenses and taking some additional dart throws at running back or D tackle. Again, he's probably a team that's a year away from being a year away. Took some shots at quarterback, and those could potentially either pan out or turn sour in a hurry. So we'll see what he does with those. Doesn't have a running back yet, but he does have the 109. So there's some really good options for that. But again, he needs a lot of other pieces to really be ready. So I think he probably continues to trade down, trade out, make this draft and next draft really his cornerstone drafts and really start to look at 2025 as his year. He's cleared a lot of the bad contracts, or they're a year away. Still has $26 million in cap. So the big thing here is consolidate the defense pieces you have, get the value you can, and then take some dart throws at running back, at D tackle, and see if something kind of pans out here.
Yeah, I was trying to pull up his picks that he's got now. So he's got 109, 122, 204, and some change in the third and fourth.
Well, like I pointed out last week, I'll do it again. He needs a punter.
That is true.
No, but in like a more like direct approach here, I don't know how he has 40 players. I'm kind of surprised by that number. But no, I mean, like, it's interesting to watch what he's doing. I'm not sure where he's going as far as like, is he going to try and break down that receiver core closer to the week 1 window when they have their defined roles? Is he going to just kind of live and let live? And whatever, pick he gets next year and so on, he gets. I don't know. He has players everywhere except running back. And that doesn't mean a lot for this roster. It just isn't. It's interesting that he has so many players.
Yeah, I feel like I liked his options better with like Pickett and the 104 than with the question mark in San Francisco, 109, and some of the other pieces he's added.
Yeah, like it's a blend of like, okay, I understand with why do you have this player? Like, get rid of them. Like Duvernay. The big one to me that stands out is TJ Edwards. Why do you have him? Like, it doesn't make any sense. But I'm sure as the off season progresses, we'll find out what's going on there.
Yeah, I mean, I am going to be curious. Like, is he just going to have to cut players? It's not like there's very few teams that have like a ton of openings on their roster after taking into consider draft capital. So like, is he just going to have to cut a bunch of these players so that he can actually make his picks? I guess he's not using his taxi right now, so he can find 3 spots there. But probably why doesn't he have a punter? I guess he could cunt that kicker and free up some more spots just to make the picks. But that's something else I'll be interested to see what he does.
Well, I mean, again, TJ Edwards, I think he has because of his RFA tag. So he tags in players. I think maybe some question of should he have tagged them or should he have let them go and potentially gotten a comp pick for them? Because he would have gotten a 3rd-round comp pick for Edwards, I believe. So was this the right move, or was there another way to play this that may have been better? Because, again, unless he gets a better than 3rd-round comp pick for Edwards, it's lost value. So then it's a question of where do you go from here? I think he's still got plenty of pieces he could cut. Like, again, I like Luke Masterson. I like what he did in his opportunity, but he's probably out of the role there in Las Vegas. He's $26 million in cap, and a couple pieces he can either move off of or still move now that he's gotten them to be a little bit cheaper. So he just needs to be active. I feel like the only time I've engaged with him in deals is when I've made an offer and he's countered. He might need to make the first move on a couple of these to really get his team to where he needs to.
Yeah.
All right. Let's talk about the NFC East. How about them Cowboys? Again, trying to move things along here. I'm going to say the obvious. Running back, the end. That's where he's got to focus on here. You could tell me anything. Like, you could say, I'm a time traveler from the future. I've come from a year in the future, and here's what Cam Akers did this year, and I would probably believe you. You could say he injured his knee in week 1 and didn't score a single fantasy point. You could say he was responsible for 1,500 yards from scrimmage and 12 touchdowns. And, again, I would believe either side of those. So I have no idea what to make of him. So something more stable and more predictable at that position will be good. Again, I think he's got to decide on a fifth-year option for him this year. So that'll go into that. And then D-end, Zacharias Matos, who is probably a good D-end 3. So he really needs another D-end 1 or 2 to at least get points from the position while he's getting above average points everywhere else. So something that kind of gets him settled in those two positions makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. 107 is the pick he's sitting on. It might be a bit of a reach to take a running back at 107. It's not going to be Bijan. It's not likely. If it's Gibbs, let's say his landing spot's not ideal. Like that's probably why he's going 107, and that probably means he's not really going to help your room as much as you'd hope. That might be too soon for the best landing spot for DE fantasy wise, but we'll be interested to see how he utilizes that pick.
Oh, he's going to take Will Anderson.
It's either going to be a linebacker or a running back.
Yeah, he's going to do what he's always done. He's going to take the next Micah Parsons.
All right, so Nolan Smith, one of the Cowboys, 107.
I mean, that's the other thing that you guys made the point earlier is this is a temporary situation. Kayvon and Parsons will pivot over to D-end next year.
Yep.
So, again, if he does address the position, it needs to be in a, not super expensive way. So I think he absolutely should go running back. And I think there's a legitimate chance Gibbs is going to be there. Again, say Gibbs falls to day 2. You have 3 quarterbacks, a running back, and 2 receivers go ahead of him. Again, if Flowers goes to Kansas City, for example, JSN's a top 15 pick, and you have 4 quarterbacks in the top 15, as some are predicting, then I would expect Gibbs is going to be there at 107.
Yeah, I mean, there's 4 quarterbacks, 2 receivers, and 2 running backs, right? Like that's how it breaks down. So there's a top 8. It's just a matter of if the person that he wants falls there or if he pivots. But I think his case study is the best for next year. Like he's set up nicely for next year when true position takes over. This year,
he needs an actual middle linebacker to go with Greenlaw. But yeah,
right. But we don't know what the starting lineups are going to look like, and hopefully we know that soon. But it's interesting. He's more set up for next year with IDP true position than he is this year. But even so, he still doesn't have a bad situation at all. I like his wide receivers. Ish. But I don't know. His defense is pretty stand out. Just from like looking at it quickly, and his offense is subpar minus Trevor, and even Trevor's kind of, I guess, average for a higher end quarterback in fantasy in this league.
Average for a higher end quarterback.
Well, I mean, Kirk Cousins scored 329 points, and Trevor Lawrence had 333. So, is he elite or is he just average, fantasy wise, at least?
I think if you were scoring more than 300, you're in the conversation. But he also has some mobility to his game, and wasn't throwing at Justin Jefferson. So,
yeah, I think Lawrence is in the population that can make the leap to Josh Allen next year, and his game really mirrors what Allen does well, and Allen has succeeded and doesn't require a complete rebuild of his throwing motion to get there.
Yeah. And you might be able to argue that offensive pieces wise, the Jaguars might be a stronger unit than the Bills.
Again, yeah, there is an argument to be made there. All right, moving along. Talk about RJ's team. What I had is dice rolls and cap dumps. The man has all of, if not most of my 24 draft capital that I was hoarding last year, and he's less than a year away from, not less than a year, but close to a year away from using it. So, has to require far less discipline to hang on to it. At this point, he has 16 open roster spots, 45 open years, and about $83 million in cap space. So all of those things lead to a wonderful situation to take on some of these bad contracts and really pick up a couple of dice rolls in the process. So he's maintaining flexibility as his way of doing. But now it's just a matter of kind of sending every team in the league an offer and seeing what pans out from it, and really setting your team up for basically preseason, training camp, preseason, who could potentially break out and get you even more capital to build with.
You're wasting a year of Johan Dotson.
So
Again, Jahan Dotson, and I was thinking about it the other day. He's kind of the type of receiver of the future, and I expect Washington is where Lamar Jackson ends up. Like, if that's the case, then he could immediately, as soon as Jackson signs, flip Dotson for 50% more than he paid for him.
And he already paid like
You paid way
50%
more
off
than
his
you
price. So
yeah, I fully intend on just sitting on him.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would too, 100%.
Yeah.
Sit on him, waste a year. So what? I did the same thing with Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase last year.
we were just talking about the Saints needing to move players and clear up space and stuff for their picks. Obviously, RJ might be a good fit here to take on some draft capital to facilitate said transaction.
I will take on all the junk, 4 picks. I also did put Dotson on my trade bait, so if anybody would like to make an offer for him or any of my desirable assets,
I'll send you an offer right now.
I'll probably
Take one.
decline it, but
So this is a perfect transition to the Giants. And Brandon, I think I told you this is what I was going to say about you last week, so please don't take this the wrong way. I don't want you to do anything. I don't want you to do anything crazy. And this is not because I'm competing against you. This is because looking at your roster and how it's set up, please don't do anything crazy. You are the favorite in the NFC right now. So making major moves to go from Jerry Jeudy to something else, or move this draft capital for even more draft capital, or move up to a top 10 pick, it's not worth it. Just by all means, improve where you can improve, and you've always done well of that, but don't do anything crazy. Please, this team is good enough, not necessarily good enough as is, but good enough to compete. So keep yourself in that position and don't do anything that is going to put that at risk.
So the 5 trade offers I have open right now, I should just close.
it'll be 4 real quick.
No. That was already assuming you canceled mine.
At least that's my view. I mean, again, if people disagree with me, or Brandon, if you disagree with me, by all means, tell me I'm wrong. But you're 4 deep at receiver. You've got a good 1-2 punch at running back. Josh Allen is a difference maker. George Kittle's a difference maker. And you've got a pretty good I'd say top 15 to top 10 defense. So, again, making major changes to this roster is not the way for success. It's supplementing it with some of the ancillary pieces, like your draft capital, to improve at running back, to improve on defense. So those are the things you should be doing if you want my unvarnished, unbridled opinion here.
Yeah.
I say tear it down.
Amen, brother.
Me too.
That's always
Speaking of
helpful.
tearing it down, does that mean we're going into the NFC West?
Just about one more
Oh,
NFC
okay.
East team.
I thought,
He is
I
your
thought that was a
pot
good
commander.
lead in.
From here on out, he is your commander.
Oh, okay. So all 5 teams should be torn down.
So, I mean, it's pretty straightforward what Commanders needs. Tight end. I mean, Komet, unfortunately, seems to be in a tight end timeshare with Tanyan. So he needs another option there because Komet's not the breakout option we all thought he was going to be. And then a front 7 in terms of D end or linebacker is defense has always been a challenge, has always been a problem. So, he needs to focus on that. He does have some draft capital to do that, but he actually needs to convert it or trade it. I think he should be able to get basically his choice of linebackers with one of those late firsts. But then it's a question of what do you do at tight end? Is Tanyan an option to go get? I think Rams has him, or is he going to sit pat? And then from a D end, what can he go by with what he has? So he's got a lot of different options, a lot of different ways to do this, especially with some of the big names he has on offense. I think like Mike Evans would be his desired trade piece, but with an unclear quarterback and a couple of other pieces, that might not be where he gets the most value or the most conversion from. So I know I just said a lot about it, but again, if you can address those three positions, he's right back in the playoffs.
I think he needs to work on quarterback a little bit. I think that's his main concern. No, I don't necessarily know if Tua is going to get hurt or not, obviously, but that's obviously the big risk here. That roster is great with a quarterback for the most part, but with the huge uncertainty that is Tua and his health, he needs to work on that side of it.
Yeah, he just needs to be more active.
Yeah, I don't know where Sean went this offseason. He just disappeared.
Because I feel like he's capable of flipping some of these older pieces. I mean, he's got 4 picks next year in the first, so like maybe he's just okay with kind of running this out, and they're not his picks, so it doesn't matter how well he does with this like short term kind of window team.
I think he'd be okay tanking, like to a degree. I think he would be okay with it if people just paid him like legit value. Like he's not going to take, pennies on the dollar for Evans or Tyreek. He's going to want you to pay like he's still contending, kind of thing. So it's very interesting what position he's in with all this.
I don't love how like half the fucking first round picks next year in my division.
So the big trade I came up with, which I think would just be really good for all sides involved. Patriots really wants to move to 24. He has 4 first-round picks this year. Those 4 first-round picks for Commanders' entire 24 draft, which is 4 firsts, 2 seconds, 2 thirds.
No chance. No chance he does that. 2 reasons. 1, the uncertainty of Sean's activity. You never know when he's going to check in this offseason. And 2, the class by comparison of the expectation for next year is so far and beyond different.
I mean, I hate to say this, but that's every year. Remember how this year was the class of, oh my God, there's going to be so many can't-miss quarterbacks this year, and the receiving core is going to be so insane. Like, you have to pivot to 23. And now 24, it's, oh my God, Marvin Harrison is going to be insane, and so will Caleb Williams. And I don't expect them to go anywhere, but okay, what comes after that?
Yeah, it's not as it's top heavy. Next year's draft is top heavy.
We still have a college football season to tell us what's going to come after that, but this continuous, like, 2 years in the future, that's what you need to be aiming for. Whereas the strength of this class isn't necessarily in the top end positions for running back or receiver. It's the depth of those positions, and it's a elite set of pass rushers and linebackers. Not necessarily linebackers, but rush linebackers. So in our NDNs. So if you need a front 7, this is not a bad class to have picks in, and that's what he needs. So again, I think he wants to try and acquire the picks and build for the future, because that's a lot of fun too. But he's not getting the people who have the 24 picks he wants aren't going to move them for his assets. So he's either got to move them for other assets, or he's got to change his strategy. And unfortunately, that's just what it is. And we've all been there. We've had a strategy and had to adjust it, but that's unfortunately what he's going to do. All right. Let's move to the NFC West. 49ers, come on, obvious. He needs a quarterback. Maybe Tom Brady is the solution for him as he comes back and plays quarterback for the Dolphins? Probably not. But needs a quarterback, doesn't have one. Closest he has is the backup for what looks like Bryce Young right now. So we'll see if that actually amounts to anything. But nonetheless, figure that out, and then you can kind of go from there.
Yeah, his running backs. I mean, I don't know that Joe Mixon's going to be back in Cincinnati, and then the question is, all right, well, where's an opportunity for him going to lie? So that'll be something to monitor very closely. And he traded his future first for Mixon, if you remember, a couple weeks back or more. But he's got some pieces. I mean, he's got Hutchinson and Hubbard and Shaq Lawson. Well, Shaq Lawson, yeah. But he's got Hutchinson and Hubbard on defensive end. Pretty solid. He's got a good linebacking group. Points, for best ball. So it's really like – and a really deep, I think, wide receiver group. So I just don't know how he can solve the quarterback problem.
He's hoping for 116.
Yeah, like I mean, is that going to be Hendon Hooker, who might not play for most of this year? Like,
he's not going to draft a quarterback at 16. It's not going to be there for him.
He's not going to draft a quarterback that is going to be useful this year. I mean, if he can talk to Seahawks and like get a deal done of some kind, he might be a great option for Seahawks to trade down from 6. Now, I don't know what he would have to give to get that done, but, I mean, all Seahawks has been wanting to do is trade down from 6 for months now, and maybe that's a good opportunity to do so. What he would have to add to 16, no clue, but that's not my problem.
No, I mean, that's an interesting idea, and getting to 6 would get him in that quarterback range. I'm thinking more in terms of if another team wanted to move out. So if I scroll up here to a team who I think I suggested pivot to the future, what would he have to add to 116? Oh, I'm sorry. Probably, he's not going to get Lamar Jackson, but look for a team like that who's got in a position where it makes sense for them to pivot a year, put off for a year, things of that standpoint. Would 116 pull you back Daniel Jones or something close?
I mean, Packers has Love and Rodgers, like two starting quarterbacks now.
No way.
I mean, yeah, could 116 get you Rodgers?
I don't know. Jeremy's very all in on this season. I don't know that he touches anything.
Yeah.
Or, again, Jets.
Well, what about Cowboys at 107? You can give him Mixon and 116.
Again, you could, but then it's a question of, hey, I'm giving 116 in my future first for 107. Is that the deal you want to make?
Yeah, probably not.
Again, the Jets are moving the right direction, but not a player or two away. They've got to have this draft happen first. So 116 probably gets you Jimmy. It's an overpay. You probably want like a second rounder back or something like that, but that's an option to get you a starter.
That might be able to get you 116 and 116 might be able to get you Jimmy and Devonta Smith.
No, definitely not.
Or go to Chargers. He has Sam Howell and Geno Smith. Could 116 get you Geno?
No.
If they draft a quarterback this week, yeah.
I mean, yeah, it would you wouldn't pay 116 for Geno there. So you put 116 out there and say, look, if they draft the quarterback at 5 or 20, then you're in a tough situation, especially considering that the deal that Geno just signed is basically a 1-year extension. At the same time, though, if they don't, it's a home run. So you got to you're going to be able to take a shot here at 116 to get a pretty decent quarterback, but you got to send out the offers to get it. It's not going to just come up, knock on the door, and say, "Hey, I'd like you to take this from me," and bend over.
So this is the ultimate risk reward version of that. Go to the Ravens for Davis Mills.
Yeah, I think he still has he should have a second to be able to move. That probably gets it done for Davis.
Go get Tannehill, and then send Joe Mixon, and then Bijan can go 101, or a quarterback can go 101.
Yeah, quarterback can go 101.
Yeah.
There's a lot of opportunity there. The owners in the West are not as active as they could be to make all this very fun.
I'll say proactive. I think they respond, they reject trades for sure. But
that is a nicer way to say it. I'll say that. Not a better or nicer way to say it. All right. We are at the hour 20-minute mark here, so we're probably not going to cover trades tonight. We'll push that to the second pod this week. We'll knock out the last three teams, though. Cardinals, up there with Rams as the potential probably front runners for the West this year. With Burrow, Walker, and Jefferson, that's a pretty good top three on offense, but really needs to add to depth and at the defensive end. His tight ends are expensive but useful. Really, he seems like he needs depth at receiver and running back. And then D end is a pretty gaping hole at the moment. Not sure what he does to fill that because a lot of his capital is tied up in that big three. So he may be another team, kind of like a couple we mentioned last week, that is excited for the 25 picks because then he can buy those and use that to fill in some of those gaps.
Yeah. It's one of those, like, this is like the Justin Jefferson moment. He's about to get expensive. You could break him down, I'm sure, for a haul to fill this roster with a downgrade at wide receiver and an upgrade at defensive end and maybe a depth piece at running back or something to the right team. But I think he's been very unwilling.
I mean, and that's rightfully so. He shouldn't take Justin anywhere.
Again, he's got to be, like you said, he's got to be blown out of the water for Justin. Yeah. It's someone's got to come and it's got to be, okay, Patriots has envy of how Bill did this last year, so he's trading his 4 first-rounders this year for Justin.
Right.
It's got to be something like that where it's like, all right, I'll trade 4 first this year to go get that. So again, it's got to be blown out of the water, but he's got to figure something out here because this team might get you to the playoffs, but it's not getting you past the first round.
Yeah. He also needs to pick up these 5th-year options.
He did. He declared Burrow and Jefferson like a month or so ago. They just haven't been marked for some reason.
See, commissions need to get on these 5th-year options. But we love you.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. In a lot of cases, they're just logged someplace. Whether they've been, asked for or not, they've been logged. And you got to check the spreadsheet because there's only 32 of them, and I think there's over 16 in that spreadsheet right now. So, all right, over to the Rams, receiver and linebacker depth, and then more importantly, though, cap space. Like the guy needs to add things, but he has no space to be able to do it in at this point. So, go find yourself some damn cap space. And then, because here's the issue that he's running into, and we talked about this off pod, but let's talk about it on pod. His cap space issue is of his own doing. In terms of auction, he paid $4.2 for PJ Walker. He paid
$8 million for Jack Gibbons.
9.5 for Shai Smith, $3 million for Kendall Hinton, 6 for Jordan Akins, 11 for Grover Stewart, 6 for. I'm sorry, that wasn't. What's that? No, that was last year.
He played 9 for Jihad
Ward, 8 for Gibbons. If I add up his auction wins, that's, let's see, 5.8, 13.8, 22.8, 28.8, call it 40, 46, 53, 56, $60 million of cap space that he used on players that are flyers. And again, that's what you have to do in free agency. I'm not disputing that. But when you're in a situation now where you have to fill in the rest of your roster and you have $2 million to do it, now you're in a position where you force yourself that you've got to move off of core pieces or pieces that you thought were core, because nobody at this point is going to pay you for any of those pieces you bought, let alone, a piece of value because you picked them off of free agency. Could you get a third or fourth or fifth round pick for him? Maybe, but that's not going to get you what you need. And, it's not going to be a value that you're expecting for that player. So he's in a really tough spot here to get the cap space he needs to fix his team. And now he's definitely got to do it with pieces that he probably doesn't want to move.
Yeah, 100%. But I mean, overall, if he does nothing, his team is fine. I like his team the way it is. But yeah, he's got some space issues. But we've all been there. We've all been through our cap issues before.
This would be a team that I would recommend not spending your 25 picks this year to build out your roster. Like, he's got a couple great long-term pieces, but I don't know, like Stafford, I'm like really worried about. He's 35. He's had the arm issue all this past season. I don't think that's something that just like some rest and TLC is going to fix long term. Obviously, great contract, but like, I don't know. There's not like enough here in the bones to be like, let me just go shop because I'm going to have a competitive roster for the next couple of seasons.
Yeah.
Especially with what like Seahawks is building and what Rams could be if you were to break down one of those bigger pieces.
Yeah. Brandon, I love what you said there, and I will read exactly what I wrote in my write-up here. Rams should not pay for 2025 so he can retain that asset as long as possible so he's not always robbing the future to keep a one-and-done run going.
Hive mind. I love it.
Hey, great minds think alike. All right, last but not least, we'll talk about the Sea Chickens. And no disrespect to our actual Seahawks. I'm a Niners fan. I have to disrespect the Seahawks every time I get a chance. That said, the move here, and it seems obvious because he's been trying to do half of this all off season, but the other half he hasn't thought about yet, and I think he's still kind of thinking to build around. Move Breece and Kyle Pitts. Again, both players have done an excellent job retaining their value. Breece obviously now has a upgraded quarterback situation and should see better running lanes. Assuming he comes back healthy, which it looks like he's on track to for training camp from his knee injury. So his value is maintained. So he probably won't get 101 for that right now, but he'd get close to that value, or probably RB1 value for him if he was able to move him. So he's got to find the right spot for that. And there's a couple of teams I think that have picks and really need that running back to come through. The second piece is Kyle Pitts, who, again, has maintained his value. He hasn't broken out like everyone thought, but this is year 3. Tight ends, it's always year 3. So he still has the value that he needs. Tight end should be the last piece you buy, not one of the first. Take Kyle Pitts, go get all the pieces you want. Hell, I'm sure RJ would love to give you a couple first rounders for 24. Go get the pieces you want to finish building out your team. He is a asset that has maintained value This is year 3, though. This is the make or break year for him. If he doesn't break out this year, this is when it starts going the wrong direction. Granted, if he does break out this year, it starts going the up direction. But rebuilding, you can't miss on these assets. You can't miss on the value you have in your team. You can't let that value disappear.
Yeah, Pats too could be another Pitts buyer. But the thing about Pitts, though, is, I mean, this is his second to last cheap year. He's going to be very expensive come fifth-year option time. So that's kind of a bummer. But that's the reality of a tight end position. It takes a while in the real NFL. It takes a while in fantasy. And that's probably why you shouldn't be spending a mid-first-round pick on a tight end in this upcoming draft. I will continue to have that PSA as my mantra.
Well, not this year anyway. You gotta wait for next year to do that. Good old Brock Bowers.
I mean, if Pitts showed you anything, right? Like, maybe not. But yeah, Seahawks. I mean, I know he wants to trade down.
I'm curious what he's going to do in the draft with those 2 high picks, because he clearly wants to tank for next year still. So is he going to? Part of me wonders
if he takes Anthony Richardson, who might sit for a year, and then he takes whatever. If he can't move 6, he takes just best player available. Hopefully, a wide receiver, not a running back, so that has a longer shelf life. Or hell, take Will Anderson. Have a DE. He needs to bulk up anyways. So, if he's not as productive as you want in year 1, that's okay.
Tis true.
But like I was saying, like, he's got 2 picks next year, a bunch of second and thirds next year. Like, he's got a shit ton of. Let's see, he's got 2 firsts, 2 seconds, 3 thirds, all before 308 in this draft. Like, he's gonna fill out this roster a bit. He's got endless cap space for our league right now to acquire some more draft capital, to take on some contracts. I think he's in a really good spot, and he's been pretty patient doing the right things.
All right, 90 minutes of gold. And because we love you all so much, this is not going to be the last pod this week. We are damn close to draft season, so either tomorrow or Wednesday we'll do an additional more draft-focused pod as we're kind of finalizing probably our mock draft for our league in terms of what we think it's going to look like in that first round. We'll either do it live or we'll have a couple of previously done GMs mocks to review. And then we'll talk about the trades that have happened as we're getting towards the end here and what else we might see take place before we actually get to the draft. But a lot of fun, a lot of activity to go here. Really appreciate the 3 of you guys and Panthers jumping on and joining tonight. Look forward to talking to you again later this week. So for now, thanks very much for listening, and we'll talk to you later.